Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Make It Smart Hub Get Ready for Digital Construction webinar delivered by the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. Hello, my name is John McLennan and I'm an Innovation Centre Manager with the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre based in Inverness in the Highlands and Islands and covering the North East. Before we get underway, I'd just like to highlight some housekeeping points to help the webinar run as smoothly as possible. Firstly, the session is being recorded today and presentations will be available following the conclusion of the webinar. All participants will be on mute for the duration of the webinar, but I do encourage you to ask questions throughout. To do so, click on questions in the chat panel, type in your question and press send. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A session. In the background, we have Danielle, who will make sure everything runs smoothly. I want to briefly introduce you to CSIC and what it does to drive forward innovation in construction and manufacturing. CSIC is a core element of the innovation support landscape in Scotland and is recognised as a key asset in the UK-wide innovation ecosystem. Over the past 6 years, we have grown our reputation as an enabler of built environment innovation activity, helping industry, academia and public sector partners to move beyond the aspiration stage and forwards towards realising change and capturing real value. CSIC have 4 strategic themes: digital transformation, the subject of the webinar today, accelerating industrialisation, including digital techniques and off-site manufacturing, culture change, including an inclusive workforce, recruitment and retention, and building sustainably, materials, retrofit, etc. We deliver these strategic themes through a connected ecosystem, collaborative projects, our innovation factory, and future skills programs. For more information, please visit the CSIC website, which we'll post in the chat. And please visit and register if you haven't done so already on the Make It Smart Hub website, where you can access a wealth of information, including news stories, case studies, recordings of previous webinars we have done, and access to further support. You can also register a challenge or find a possible solution through the matchmaking platform on the website. And again, we'll post the details of the website in the chat. Today's webinar is a Q&A session with experts in their field and will be hosted by Saffron Grant of Digital Construction Skills. I will shortly hand over to Saffron, but I would just like to welcome Gary Kelly of Leica Geosystems, Simon Butler, George Leslie Limited, Antoinette Irving of the Supply Chain School, and Douglas Hamilton of Concentris Limited. And to our speakers from our 2 spotlight sessions, Grant and Tom, who will be speaking at 20 minutes to the hour. Over to you, Saffron.
Brilliant. Hi, thanks, John. Thanks very much. My name is Saffron Grant and I'm the Managing Director of Digital Construction Skills, and we are funded by CITB to deliver a programme of training and support for digital enablement and digital strategy to SME construction companies. So yeah, so the topic today is get ready for digital construction. Now, there's a lot of discussion at the minute about whether we're ready as an industry, but today we're going to bring that down to an individual company level and even the individual person level, and really get into the nitty-gritty of the questions you need to be asking yourself if you're thinking about how digital tools and digital ways of working might add value to your business. It's a really interesting topic actually, because I think not knowing if you're ready can be just as much of a blocker as actually not being ready. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to our panel guests today and getting some tips on how we can work out what the starting point is. My personal view is that everybody's always ready and at the same time never ready. If you're not ready, the only way to become ready is to set an intention and to start to take positive steps. Now, everybody's got their own approach to change of any kind. Some people tend to dive straight into something and go on a crazy roller coaster, steep learning curve, and I include myself in that. whereas others like to do a bit more thinking, dip their toe in the water and proceed a bit more cautiously. They need to know that they're in control of the speed and the nature of the change. And neither of those things is right or wrong, it's just different approaches. And that's no different for digital. You know, we all have different starting points, we all have different budgets, different appetites for risk. Every company has its own unique blend of people and personalities, skills, experiences, values, and we give these credence, you know, in any change process. Some people might decide that they want to look at their company's systems and processes and get them all in place before they even think about digital tools. But some might just embark on a process and find that process shines a spotlight on how bad everything was before that, and they can use that as a driver to get things streamlined. But they're still further forward than if they hadn't started in the first place. You know, some people might have a business plan and, you know, it's all kept up to date, and then they use that as a measuring stick for whether a certain digital tool might take them closer towards the goal. And again, on the other hand, some people might, you know, just get started and realise that process is going to force them to think about things that they probably should actually have had clarity on before. Like, you know, how much time does each person in this company spend doing paperwork every week, every month, every year? How many claims have been unsuccessful because we didn't have the evidence to support them? But one thing I do want to highlight though is that there is support available for construction companies to help with digital enablement, and there is funding and there are tax incentives. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of those just now. You know, there's probably a whole other webinar on that, but if you would like any help with that, do get in touch, because Digital Construction Skills, as I say, is funded by CITB to provide up to 8 hours of bespoke digital strategy support for CITB registered companies. And part of that involves working out all the resources that you have available to you to streamline that process. So I guess today, John's introduced them, and I'll do separate introductions as we go through it. So basically, I'll just get started. So Gary Kelly of Leica Geosystems has been helping construction companies with implementing digital tools for years. And one of the common problems he comes across is to do with IT. So that's what we're going to focus on here. Is your you know, IT system in your IT department ready for digital change? So Gary, how do companies know if their IT system is ready for them to adopt new digital tools? I can't hear, I think you're on mute, Gary.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want me to? I'll just recap the question. Yeah. So, how do companies know if their IT system's ready for them to adopt new digital tools?
Okay, I'll give you a better answer this time. There is no right or wrong. So this is the hardest part, is that when we speak to a company, they expect us to just open a box and we can roll things out. It doesn't quite work like that. We need to understand basically what you're trying to adopt, where do you want to get to, what you've already got, because a lot of people invest in certain things for a particular direction they want to take that company in, but we actually need slightly different bits of IT for other elements. So actually, when we sit down at the start of anyone's digital journey, we need to understand what you have at any given point in time, and then start to speak to where you want to get through. And it's actually a lot more information, or it's more important for us to understand the things that you don't have, or the limitations that we're gonna bring on, than the things that you want to bring to the place. So say, for example, if we're speaking to you and you want to go down a path of sending data between multiple sites, well, it doesn't matter what computers we use or what technology we bring in total stations, GPS or anything like that, if you haven't got a basic broadband or decent set of broadband to bring the data from A to B. And that's a restriction that we're going to have. On the flip side of it, we get promised, or we have companies that have invested a lot of stuff in technology which was correct for a particular element, so maybe a CAD design team, but that IT infrastructure doesn't necessarily allow itself to automatically flip for the guys that are involved in the construction. And I think there just needs to be a little bit more of a balance. The question is how do you, the company already has some level of IT, and if you speak to us and you say we have an IT manager or we have an IT team, then we're already in the right place, because you understand that as a fundamental part of your business, that is something that we need to focus on moving forward. And another thing that also plays in is that a lot of the conversations that we have now, so let's say I joined Leica quite some time ago now, and initially when we spoke to construction companies, site managers, engineers, engineering managers, same when you go to the manufacturing side, but it was all about the technology involved in the product. It was a total station, it was the laser scanner, it was a GPS, the pipe laser, the rotating laser. But now the conversation that we have, it's not about I suppose the magical toy that we're going to bring to the people in the field. It's actually how do we integrate everything back so that you're getting the efficiencies out of it. And that is a conversation that involves IT. Whether people like it or not, we have to involve IT in that conversation. So let's say it would be nice to be able to just turn around and go, there's a checkbox, A, B, C, D, E, buy them and that's you. But it isn't that simple. We need to understand where you are, but more importantly, we want to understand where you're going to, and then we can help you.
Brilliant, very interesting. So what questions should companies be asking to suppliers like yourselves or any other suppliers before they, embark on a digital change project?
I think before you actually engage an outside organisation to go, you need to engage your own. So you need to speak within your company to say, what do we have? What do we not have? Be completely open, but it's also a lot of times, again, we'll speak to companies and they'll say, well, we have this spec of PC or we have this type of technology. And then the next question we've got to ask is, but what about your people? So who do you have that understands this part of the technology? And it might be the infrastructure that's actually in the office. But if you're trying to then deal with, again, people that are out with the office, we're trying to communicate data, or you've got an IT person that's specifying a PC, for example, are they liaising with the design team to understand that whole infrastructure is built to meet their demands? So what we need you to do is to have a bit of an audit within yourself, just to work out what you have and where your strengths lie, because you're going to have to help kind of self-facilitate this moving forward, and then pick the right people to be involved in that conversation. I think that's important as well, is that involve the team that are going to be there, involve people to be involved, and then it cuts down on the kind of blockage down the line where people maybe either feel left out or left behind because they don't know how to embrace that technology. Once you've got past that first stage, and let's say be completely open with any supplier that you're speaking to. If you don't have it, then we will be able to help you. We can talk you through how to get these things on board, what some of the best ways to bring them in. Also, whether you need to kind of have a heavy investment, a light investment, whether there's other ways to bring the stuff involved. But any reputable supplier should be able to liaise with you in so much as helping make that process as simple as possible. Another thing as well that you really need to be open to, and one thing that we often run into, is the costing of IT. And it shouldn't be seen as a separate cost to the other equipment that you're investing in. So if you invest in some equipment that's required for the construction team on a site, and the IT needs to back it up, that level of investment should be bunched together. And the reason for that is that if you then say, the simple example that I always kind of refer to is that we have people that say, right, well, I'm going to give this engineer in the field all this equipment because it's going to make them faster, quicker. We can send them digital drawings and they can set out directly from here. But if that engineer has to return to the office to go and actually process the data, well, that's not as efficient as it would be if we actually gave them a laptop that they could use on the site. It also means that they don't have to travel back to the office, they can go from site to site. But people cost that laptop separately to everything else. Whereas if you start to take into account the time of the engineer, the travel costs, fuel expenses and everything else, then actually it pays for itself, but it isn't costed in that same way because it's branded as IT and it's not branded as part of the actual construction process in itself. And I think that needs a little bit of a mind change as well, that actually what we're providing here is a solution. It's not just lots of bits and pieces of equipment. And like I say, any reputable manufacturer will give you basic specifications of where you need to get to. But I think also when you take those specifications, again, if you have sat down at the start of the journey and said, where do we want to be in 3 or 5 years' time? What's the ambition? Then if you get a basic specification, anyone who knows how quickly you change your iPhones and everything else as you go through it, there's a new one every 2 or 3 years. And this is somewhere where you say, well, if this is what we need to get to, let's not benchmark at the basic level because that will keep us working for the next 2 or 3 years if we've got ambitions to go further in 4 or 5. If we're going to be further in 4 or 5, well, actually, let's bring on the IT at this point in time to support that growth. It'll save me money in the long run, but it'll also allow me to test and supply everything else. And then something else as well, which a lot of people forget, is that you don't basically go out. I always refer to things like cars, but you don't take on a car without taking it for a test drive. So when you're sitting there thinking, right, I'm speaking to a supplier about what is potentially a reasonable level of investment, well, let me test drive it. And that test drive can be helping you to basically set up the infrastructure so that we know that your IT network can support software, licenses, whether we can share licenses, what's the most effective way to do it, run through a trial process. Anyone will help you support it. I know suppliers and our kind of distribution partners in Scotland absolutely will support this process. And then at the end of that kind of first step of the trial, we sit back and we say, what's gone right, what's gone wrong? And then if you then sit there and say, right, our company has struggled because we found this pinch point or this element or the licensing didn't work, it might be something that can be changed in how that solution is brought to you, or it might just be something it's just simply a lack of knowledge. We maybe haven't communicated how we could have done things differently at the time. But it's a quite simple process. But if you don't engage in the conversation to see where the pinch points are, we can't help you get by them. But a lot of people don't understand the pains that you're about to go through. We've been through it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times over already in the past 12 months with various other companies. So it's not your, let's say, it's not your problem that we can't overcome, but we need to be aware of it. And like I say, if you go through all that, I think then you'll get there very, very quickly. But you just have to engage.
And so just very briefly, what do you think is the key mindset changes that are needed in relation to IT that would support a kind of successful digital transformation?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, before you go down the process, I think you need to have a roadmap. You need to have a roadmap in place, and that roadmap needs to involve your own people, your own employees. And I think you also need to pick out people that have got certain skills and empower them to help deliver that solution within your own organisation. If they own it, they'll be more keen to ensure that it kind of progresses and develops. And I think that's a big problem, is when you meet resistance, it's often from within. And if you've got people that are championing it, that will explain how they can go through, everyone else tends to get on board. The thing is, any business as well, people have to get on board, because if you don't, you get left behind. There's also another part, which is construction and the whole manufacturing sector as a whole. Time is money, and the one thing that you always need is patience. We can't, unfortunately, move this thing day and night. The results will take a little bit of time to happen. Once they're there, it will escalate quite quickly. But obviously, time and money, just give it a little bit of peace. Take note to say, if we do take this on, we are going to have to give a little bit of time to allow things to adjust. Because if we don't, we'll just revert to type, and then nothing will go. So I think to me they're the main things: get time and allow your own people to buy in, involve them in the conversations. If all your people only ever know how to use Windows, or they only ever use an Android as a mobile device, then don't go down the path of buying iOS, because you're actually involving an extra step before we even start the process of resistance. So let's say listen, patience, and roadmap.
Brilliant. Very insightful. Thanks, Gary, for that. I think it all comes back to the fact that once you start the process, then if you've got the right supplier and the right support, that's when you start to really do the learning. So brilliant. Thanks for that. So our next guest is Doug Hamilton. Sorry. Okay, we've got Doug up there now. Sorry. Yes, the next guest is Doug Hamilton of Concentris, who's a behavioural change specialist whose career has been in two parts. First of all, in project delivery, and then in behavioural change, but basically has been involved in construction, you know, from the start of his career. So Doug, you've got a particular interest in behavioural issues around business improvement. So why do you believe that this is such a big issue when we think about the concept of embracing digital change?
Well, thanks, Saffron, and good afternoon, everyone. I think the starting point is to understand what we mean by behaviour. And the classic definition in behavioural scientists have got a bit of a bad rap at the moment, but when it's properly applied, it can be very powerful and effective. So the classic definition in behavioural science is that behaviour is what we say and what we do. Very simple, but very wide-ranging. And if we think about it for a second, that covers everything that goes on in business life. So in that respect, behavioural issues are as important in embracing digital change as they are in any other area of business life. But there are some added behavioural challenges associated with the word change, because the truth is that broadly we tend towards being comfortable in collecting things that we like for specific behaviours, and we would tend to describe them in scientific terms as consequences. So the questions we need to ask ourselves when we're trying to establish any behaviour in your business are: what prompts towards behaviour are our team or our individuals receiving? What happens to them, the consequences, when they carry out the behaviour you want? So do they get something that they broadly like out of it, or something that they find difficult? And likewise, what happens to them if they actually carry out behaviour that you don't want? In some way, they might actually be collecting some kind of positive consequence for the behaviours that you don't want within your organisation. And the issue that we have with the word change is that a change will invariably present us with a different set of consequences from our existing work patterns. A consequence is always judged by the person who's doing the behaviour, not by the person who's communicating what's expected. So for example, if you ask someone to move from using a spreadsheet to capture data to using an online logging tool for the same thing, what's their experience when they're using that tool? Is it a positive one or is it a negative one? Because that will dictate to a large extent whether people keep using it.
Okay, so in that case then you just described, you know, couldn't a business just explain, you know, what the benefits are from using the new tools, or perhaps point out some case studies where they've worked before, and people just then recognise that and just follow the expected behaviours?
Well, that seems reasonable, doesn't it? But there are some issues to address there. Who's receiving the benefits? How quickly do they accrue? And what do they actually mean for the person involved whom you expect to use the new technology? So you know, if I use an ongoing example of a utilities team who are doing excavations, for example, let's say you put some technology in the hands of that team and you explain to them that this is so they can excavate more safely and more quickly, and you say that this will bring benefits to the company and to them. Now, does that guarantee, rhetorical question, that they're going to adopt that new technology as the norm? I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who are on the call who have been through that experience would answer the question in a particular way, and I think I could be pretty sure of the response to that question. And the reason for that is that in behavioural terms, what you've just done is given some consequences that we would describe as future and uncertain. They may happen exactly as you've described them, but they're not the only ones in play, because the person using the technology might find it tricky to use and therefore finds a way to avoid using it. They may believe that their jobs are under threat because work can get done more quickly, and therefore the company needs less people. I see Tom and Jamie, who are coming on later on, they'll design some excellent products, no doubt. And when they're put in people's hands, what's the experience that they have of using that product? Because that will dictate to the majority extent whether or not they continue to use them.
So how do companies know then if their culture or leadership is strong enough to support like a smooth digital transformation? You know, what signs should they be looking for? And if they're not, if the signs aren't there, if they're not ready, you know, what extra measures do they need to take in parallel with the digital kind of selection and implementation process?
I think that's the Laura Kunsberg technique there, Saffron. There's 3 questions in one go. So listen, I've been asked these questions before on a number of occasions with clients. For instance, in relation to something like behavioural safety, are we really ready for this? So I'm going to do my standard consultant's trick here of answering that with one of my own. How does a company know if their culture or leadership is strong enough to support any type of transformation, whether it's a digital one or some other kind? And if we're to develop that into more detailed questions, there are some vital signs that you have to have in place before you embark on this journey. So I'll cover these as quickly as I can, but there's just a little bit of detail that we perhaps want to explore here together. The first thing really harks back to something that that Gary was talking about there. If you're going to do a strategic change, you actually need to have a strategy, and it would surprise you how many times people don't actually have that in place. I think the guy used the expression roadmap, but we're on the same page, I guess, there. So my advice is always have a fully developed and fully costed digital strategy in place. When I say costed, I don't just mean the financial cost, I mean the total resource cost in terms of your own time and effort, as well as the type of changed behaviour that you might need to display as a leader so you can communicate it, so you can support it, and so you can maintain it. And linked to that point, always recognise that changes in one part of your company will likely have impacts elsewhere. That's why an overall strategic approach to digital change is absolutely necessary, rather than trying to launch multiple individual changes that might be well intended in themselves but don't connect in the way they should. And again, I think Gary referred to that in his talk earlier on. Now, I will bang on about leadership behaviours, but the reason that we have to get to grips with them is so that we head off any future pitfalls. Some of you might have come across this stat before, but I was reading an article the other day indicating that around 70% of organisational transformations fail, and that can equally apply to digital change. So as a leader, to carry this through, you have to be totally committed to delivering the behaviours that people can see as genuine and genuinely supportive towards change. Now, look, we all know that change can be very tricky to implement and maintain. The most complex components in any type of change programme are the people that you're dealing with along the way. So if you like, that's the bad news. But the good news is that it's not impossible. So that's my first point, is have a grand plan and strategy. Second is identify the behaviours that your company needs to deliver at what I'll call tactical and operational levels. So what do these look like? Well, tactically, there was a great example of that recently in a seminar that you ran with some other people recently on the use of technology to avoid, again, utility strikes. And what counted to make the difference there, I humbly submit, was not the technology in itself, which of course was very useful, but the way that the data captured from the machines was fed back to the operators in a well-structured coaching regime at their workplace. So to me, that's what made the big difference in terms of the behaviours of the technology being used in the right way. So I give that as a tactical example of how you could to make improvements. The third thing I would say is, just in terms of operational behaviours, they depend to a large extent on day-to-day interactions within the workplace, and crucially between your supervisors and your workforce. So your supervisors are crucial individuals for you. Open questions: do they have the skills to engage effectively with their teams, to find out about the issues that prevent good performance, to talk about the change and what it's bringing, or to use the correct type of adult coaching style to influence them? They're very broad questions, but they cut to the core of what good workplace interactions will look like. And again, that applies to digital change as much as anything in the workplace. Now, if I can give you a very simple example, and again, it's linked to this utility strikes idea. So I'm about to kick off some work with a London-based company, and I was talking to them a couple of weeks ago about their own issues with them. And I mentioned the use of this latest generation Cat and Jenny system and the webinar that I'd seen you carry out with colleagues. And there was some shuffling of feet and looking at the floor in the room before they admitted that they had the new machines, but nobody had actually set up the software properly for them to use. Now, why did that happen? At this stage, I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I'll cut to issues of how the technology was introduced, what expectations were set down for people when they used it, whether anybody felt empowered to raise the fact that the software was not set up, or whether it actually mattered to them if it was. So I can probably summarize that by the expression, use the behaviors that put you on top of the detail. The last thing I want to say, and with this I'll wrap up, is that throughout your program, always focus your change on a positive set of consequences. You know, again, just going back to our national situation, do we want fear to be our motivator for doing things, or do we want positive outcomes to be our motivator for doing things? You know, we'll not go down that particular road right now, of course. But whether these are short or long term, my advice to you is always focus on the positive consequences, whether they're corporate ones or whether they're personal ones. And the personal ones will always have more impact than the corporate, although the two can often overlap. Just finally, Saffron, one thing I wanted to say, it's relevant to what I've said so far. When we design systems, we want to design them in such a way that are easy and rewarding for people to use. And that is often covered under the general term of human factors. Some of you have come across that before. Now that has its place and it needs to be correctly implemented. But it's only a part of the story. It's the personal interaction on individual behaviours each day that really make the difference in the workplace, whether it's at board level, whether it's at workforce level, or really anywhere in between.
Well, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Doug. There's just, I mean, subject could be a whole other webinar in itself, but no, that's been brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So brilliant. Thanks. So our next guest then is Antoinette Irving. Just wait for Antoinette to appear on the screen. Here we go. Brilliant. Hi, Antoinette. So Antoinette is the project manager for the CITB funded digital leadership project, which they've done in collaboration with Thames Tideway. And as part of the project, they've developed a tool to help people assess their digital capability. So could you just tell us a bit about the digital capability tool that you've launched, Antoinette?
Typical, my front door's buzzing at the same time. I'm trying to multitask here. So yeah, just to kind of give you a brief overview as to what's on offer. So the Supply Chain School have developed a training needs assessment. So that allows you to benchmark your digital skills. So with our industry partners and their input, we were able to kind of come together and have a real focus on what the topics and the training needs assessment that's needed. So there's 4 topics that we kind of narrowed it down to, which is leadership, commercial, capability, and technology adoption. Shall I just open it? I know, I think he's going for it. There we go. So then within that, we needed to highlight a number of digital issues or scenarios to make sure the level of understanding was available, so you can rate yourself against that. So it was from no knowledge to understanding the basics, good working knowledge, advanced knowledge, and then expert. The design of the assessment will also consider your trade categories. So we've considered 33 trade categories, and we've got 475 subcategories, making sure the assessment is relevant for whoever's then taking it. I've just checked before we joined the session, and our top 3 trades that have already started to complete the assessment is civil engineering, contracts and clients, and building and civil works. So it's impressive that we only launched this last month, and I've had over 250 people already complete the assessment, which is good.
That's brilliant. So is it just for individuals to use, or can companies use it to get an overview of the capabilities of the whole workforce?
No, it's not just for individuals. We've also designed a digital maturity matrix. So that's to allow you to to assess your organisation against that. It's free to use, and it can be accessed via our website, which is the supplychainschool.co.uk. So if you go along to the digital tab, you'll be able to access it there. You have to create an account, it's free. and you'll be able to access the individual assessment, which is the training needs assessment, as well as the digital maturity matrix. And then once you've completed a training needs assessment, you'll be issued an action plan. So this will identify your skills gaps. It will suggest learning materials, videos, documents. So we encourage that you do all of that and then do a reassessment and reassess and reassess. So you can just track your progress as you're doing it. And then for the digital maturity matrix, it will also issue a radar chart. So it scores you against industry. So again, it's good to see how your company can progress, and you can revisit this information that sits within the account that you've set up on the school.
That's brilliant. So once the training needs identified, how is it addressed then? Is it resources on your site that it points people towards, or just general?
So we've got a wealth of training. Currently, obviously, due to the situation, it's virtual, but we will do face-to-face, fingers crossed, as we go along. So we've got webinars, workshops, conferences, and this is all delivered by our subject matter experts or professional people from the industry. So with that, we've also got e-learning modules to help you with your training, and all our training is CPD accredited. And then once you've completed a course, you would also be issued a certificate, so that sits within your account as well. And then once you've completed your assessment, you're issued a digital badge from the school. So you've all got this that sits within your account. So it's always good to kind of have a kind of go-to, check what you've done, recheck, and it's all freely available.
That's brilliant, Antoinette. So that is all sitting there for companies to make use of. And there's, I mean, as I say, there's so many resources available. It's just about finding the right ones, isn't it? So that's brilliant. I'd encourage anybody who hasn't already checked out the Supply Chain Sustainability School to go. And I think that digital tab is quite a new thing. But yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, thanks, Antoinette. So finally, Simon Butler is the pre-construction manager for George Leslie, and I don't think that George Leslie needs much of an introduction. You know, they're pretty well known here in Scotland. And over the last year or so, they've been looking at new digital tools and ways of working. And you know, Simon's here, and they're happy to share what they've learned so far, so that other companies can get the benefits. So Simon, you know, when you're at the beginning of the digital journey, how do you know if your company is ready to make the start?
Hi, thanks, Saffron. As Gary, Doug and Antoinette have previously mentioned, baselining your company is an absolute first. Having that experience, maybe missing that process as soon as we should have when we started our journey. You need to check your IT is capable to deliver what you're going to deliver across the program of improvements that you're going to make. You need to baseline your people across the whole business from top to bottom, from those out on site through to senior management, managing the projects, right through to directors. What skills do they currently have? And you might be surprised how many have already gotten a lot of skills built into what they do day to day anyway. So once you know this, you can then develop your implementation plan or roadmap, or whichever word you prefer to use.
So how do you get it started then? What are the factors you need to think about?
A very, very important part of this process is to develop a matrix of what you are going to implement. So running in parallel to this baselining process, you need to gain some guidance, either from people internally that have some knowledge to create the matrix, or go externally, and that will be, what do you want out of the end of the process? There are multiple levels of implementation for digitization that you can take. For big tier ones, you're going to take every single avenue that's available, but for the smaller to medium-sized companies, you may not implement all the tools that are available across the whole range of from site, faced, recording, dealing with information that you're receiving to construct the assets that you're building, through to people that are working in the office using desktop tools for managing digital information, and also create the program of how long you're going to take to implement these tools. and make it realistic. I think what most people possibly make the error of is saying we're going to do this too quick, which is actually partly led by leaving this process too late in the day, rather than saying the business is going to invest in this now, and we'll make all the benefits and choices for us, for our processes, our systems, and fully integrated, rather than waiting until an employer says you must have. Because if it becomes to that point, you may end up picking tools up that maybe don't quite fit what you need. The full integration is important across all the tools that you will end up selecting and choosing and integrating into your processes. One thing we've found is something that's really good for site use doesn't fully integrate into the desktop tools and data storage systems that you may implement later or possibly already have. So you need to take full cognizance of the whole array before you go too far.
Yeah, go into it with your eyes open.
Absolutely.
So, and how do you get the right skills into your business then?
Again, this is a possible lesson learned by ourselves. Because so many companies are stepping into this digital tools usage, new skills, I think the first point is, we'll get some external people in that can lead this. You generally find those people are not available, because so many people are starting this journey. You need to focus on upskilling the people that you've got existing in the business. So ask everybody, engage the whole workforce that you have available. Tell them why you're doing this, what you intend to do, an approximate program of what is going to occur, and then ask who's interested, who thinks they've got the skills to start. They may only be partially skilled on certain elements, but then train those people up to do the new things that are coming over the horizon.
So just one more quick question, and I think we'll cover off on a couple of things in the questions bit, in the questions afterwards. But finally, what have you learned from your journey so far that you wished you'd known about at the beginning?
I think talking to external parties that have been doing this for quite some time now, and interfaced with an array of businesses from the tier 1s through to the small SMEs. Rather than sort of blundering through yourself, assuming that you know and you're ticking all the boxes. So if you go to an external company, there's a few that we've gone to. Digital Gorilla is one, and Zero Waste Scotland have also assisted. That these companies, although you might say when you make the first phone call, what is the cost for this interface and this assistance? You take a deep breath. Actually, in reality, it is cost effective because it can save you a lot of time, a lot of wasted people's energy within your business. So I'd definitely recommend external expertise early on. Ask them to help you do your baselining, help them build up a implementation plan for your use, and then you can manipulate that to best suit your business.
Brilliant. Again, I wish we could have had a whole webinar just on that, Simon, so maybe that's something that we'll arrange. I've just volunteered you. Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. And
thank you.
Thanks to all the guests. That's been brilliant. Really could go into so much more depth. Hopefully there's something we can arrange there in the future. And I'll hand back over to John now. Thanks very much. Thanks Simon. Bye.
Cheers.
See you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Just now quickly like to hand over to our 2 spotlight sessions. These spotlight sessions are like an elevator pitch, a chance for young early stage businesses to promote a product or service that they're either just taking to market or have got funding for. So the first up, I believe, is Grant Gibson of Bright Signals, who will hopefully be talking about his open plan system.
Hi there. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly, hopefully.
Just to say, you're on the clock, so Danielle's got you on a 2-minute timer.
Perfect. No worries, I'll be quick. So yeah, I'm Grant Gibson. Our agency is called Bright Signals, and in May 2020 we received some funding from Innovate UK to come up with a COVID solution for the construction industry. And our project that we developed was this thing called Open Plans, which hopefully I'm sharing on screen just now. So basically there's two aspects to it. There's a virtual 360 room and there's live online webinars, and the whole point of it is to recreate the village hall experience, to give people, the public, the right to reply to construction plans in the same way they would in a physical real world event, but under kind of COVID restrictions. And we found that it's really good for engagement anyway, because it means that a whole audience that wouldn't normally get to come to these things, like people that are out of work or whatever, can engage with the platform in this way. So it's worked really well so far. I'll show you I'll show you one example. So this is our 360 room, and basically we've just tried to recreate a kind of standard village hall experience. It can look any way you like, but essentially it's a room. It can have information about the team behind it. It can have video, but the main thing that people are here for are the information boards that you would normally have around the room, so they can find out all about your proposal. Our biggest client for this at the moment is SSE Renewables and Seagreen, both in Scotland and in Ireland. We've done about a dozen different consultations for them, and it's been approved by councils across Scotland, England and Ireland. So it's cheap, simple, and it works. And that's me at 2 minutes already. Flew by.
Hi, Grant. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, of course, it's one of the most sort of simplest things that you forget that COVID had an impact on, which was that the public couldn't get to these types of meetings, and there had to be some way around that in order to keep the infrastructure programme ongoing. I'm just going to hand over now to Tom of Iceni, and he's going to talk about his biodiversity monitoring system. Tom?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, John. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I've got 2 minutes. I'm going to be very, very quick. I'm Tom. I'm one of the co-founders of Iceni Earth, and we're an earth tech startup that wants to empower land-based industry to enhance and improve biodiversity. How we're doing that is we're building a digital platform that we think will be a great addition to the digital toolbox of construction companies. The platform itself consists of a mobile app and a data visualization online portal. With the app, users can go out into the fields and on sites to assess various stages of assess habitats at various stages of construction. The app works offline, and data collected can be integrated with existing systems for actually a more complete site management experience. Through the online portal, which is the other side of it, you can visualize data across the whole site and get a business view of how good your actions are on biodiversity. We're using science-based assessments and machine learning so you understand what habitat it is you're looking at and how good or bad that habitat is. We'll communicate advice on how to improve that in plain language, and you can share the data itself with those that you need to within the system, potentially even with planning authorities. We'll give you an Iceni score, which is a whole business-wide metric that you can integrate as a KPI. It's a complicated topic, biodiversity, so I won't go into it. I've only got a minute, I think. But with changing regulation, more and more companies have to achieve biodiversity net gain, and that goes for construction, infrastructure, transport, and numerous others. We're here to provide an easy-to-use, innovative solution to enable you to do that. But we're a user-driven company, so we're looking for trials and use cases to test our approach. We're currently working with about 100 farmers across Scotland in partnership with NatureScot, and we're developing a trial with an infrastructure partner. But we want more of those. So if this sounds interesting to you at all, or if you hate this topic, then give me a call. I'd be keen to have a chat and see what you think about the platform. We can kind of run demos and that kind of thing. You can get me through my email at hello@iceni.earth. We'd be really keen to connect. Thanks a lot. That's quick.
Thanks very much, Tom. Great to hear. So now we go on to for the last 10 minutes, the Q&A session, and I encourage anyone who's on the webinar to post their question to all of the panel. in the chat box. If I can just start with a question, which has actually come from the audience, and I'll paraphrase it. We have a construction industry that's made up of an older generation, an aging workforce. That's without doubt. So how do we encourage young people into the sector? And I do wonder if it's a bit about language, about making encouraging a younger workforce, and graduates and modern apprentices. How do we encourage more young and inclusive workforce into the sector, and is it about promoting digital more? I'll open that up to all the panel. Who would like to go first?
Hey, John.
Gary?
I was just going to say, one of the things that we have in terms of the kind of age demographic, if we go through that, is I think some of it is a fear factor. But what you find with the digital transition is we're not actually trying to teach you anything new. We're just trying to help you do what you already know better. So it's there to assist you so that you're better off using the skills that you've learned over the part in the piece, so that you can be better at doing them, and take away a lot of the kind of other things that make you slightly inefficient. And it's just a case of being able to explain and show people. I think once you're able to explain and show people in a language that they understand, then I think most people are quite happy to jump on board.
Okay.
If I can back that up, what Gary just said, I mean, even at basic level, when you've been introducing technology into companies, for instance, shared platforms for documentation on SharePoint or something like that, and I've seen the older generation being very distant from it. And if you just sit them down and explain, actually, if you do this and you do this and you do this, it will lead you into a place where you can access that information more quickly. Now, I know that maybe goes slightly counter to something I said earlier on, but what I'm talking about there is the personal interaction that makes a difference. It's the fact that somebody's taken the time and the effort to sit down to explain what's going on, and say to that person, you can actually access this information more quickly and more in a more user-friendly way by doing the following things. Here's my number, get in touch with me if you need to. Suddenly a whole raft of issues have gone, and it's a much more positive experience for that person to engage with that. The other thing I'll just say quickly is, in terms of our generation of social media influencers who are now in construction, I think if you're able to help the older generation or the less technically savvy generations, that counts for a heck of a lot in terms of their own value in the workplace, and in terms of their ability to influence the behavioural patterns of others around them. They then become more valued in themselves, and their skill sets become more valued, and that helps everybody along the way.
Delzy, would you try and address the issue, about the lack of digital adoption? Because that is another symptom in the sector just now. We are behind other sectors in terms of our digital adoption. That the aging workforce that's currently in place needs help to move towards adopting digital. But there's the other side, is attracting the young workforce into the sector.
I'll chip in there, because I think. Oh, sorry, Doug. Douglas, I didn't realise you were going.
No, I was going to defer to other people, Saffron. So please fire away.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's a bit of a loop that there's no doubt that having younger people coming through would help the digital transition. But I firmly believe that embracing digital in the construction industry is going to make it a less stressful, more accountable, nicer, better place to be, that will have the byproduct of attracting more diversity, younger people, and that will have a reinforcing effect. In terms of the older generation, again, I think there's a bit of myth busting to be done there, that anybody can learn anything if they want to, if they can see that it's going to make their life better. Why would someone who's a bit older not want to make their life better and quicker and make their job easier? It's just getting through that. It might just need explaining in a different way, or it might just need a different way of presenting it, or a bit more training. But it's worth it.
Okay. So, does anyone else want to contribute to that question?
I was just going to throw in, John, as well, in terms of it builds on what Saffron was saying there, but in terms of trying to promote people, and I think when the industry does go digital, then the people that actually have got the skill set know to join. I think one of the biggest problems that actually faces the recruitment is the fact that as a construction industry, we don't actually promote the digital elements of what we do. So therefore, when people have got decisions to make when they're leaving school, when they're leaving college, etc., they don't realise that this is actually open to them as a career path, because it seems to revert to type as an industry into the way that it's promoted from primary schools up. It's promoted very much along a legacy point of view of the kind of muck and bullet side of things, if you want to go down that phrase, rather than where we actually exist. And I think the view from looking out into the construction industry is completely different than if you were in the industry looking back out. And it's a case of being able to communicate that message to the wider people that are looking for jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, we've gone through that process fairly recently, where we've run trials on a number of different digital tools available, both in the field and in the office. We had the knee-jerk reaction of a certain age of people, that's never going to work, that's too complicated. We've put some time and effort into sitting them down, training them how to use it, demonstrating the benefits in terms of time saving and the instant available information. And actually within a very short space of time, they were using it quicker than some of the younger people.
Okay. I've got a question from the audience, and this will probably be the last one, if that's okay, and it's for Simon actually, and it's what would you recommend the best first step? I'm presuming it means for digital adoption or take up.
I'll answer that with 2 points. So the first thing to do is either identify somebody within your business that has some skills and aptitude towards the digital transformation of your company, to develop the matrix, do the background baseline analysis. If you don't have that, seek external advice. Also, at the same time, decide how much of the digital environment you want to step into initially, and whether that's office-based in terms of documentation control, or it's in the field. Don't try and do both at the same time.
Okay. Thank you very much. So it's been great to hear all the panelists today. Important that we've heard that if change is to be successful, we need to involve people and get them on board, not focus on some of the negatives, but really focus on the positives and the positive outcomes, whether they are corporate or personal. Great to see Antoinette, 250 registrations so far, and great to hear from Simon about picking a single issue and delivering on that. So, and thanks to Tom and Grant. Good luck with your business. Hope they are successful. And just finally from me, just to wrap up, the next webinar in the series will be announced shortly. Hopefully, we'll get to see that advertised on the Make It Smart Hub website. All those who have registered today will get an invite for this webinar. Please, and as I said earlier, please visit and register if you haven't done so already on the Make It Smart Hub website, particularly those businesses from the Highlands and Islands, because we really would like to connect. And there you can get a wealth of information, including news stories, case study recordings, and access to further support. You can also register a challenge or a solution through the Matchmaking Challenge on the Make It Smart Hub website. The Make It Smart Hub for construction and manufacturing SMEs in the Highlands and Islands is part funded by the 2014 to 2020 European Structural and Investment Fund, and support from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, SE, and the Scottish Government are also gratefully acknowledged. Thanks to my host today, Saffron, and our contributors, Gary, Simon, Antoinette, Douglas, and Tom and Grant from Iceni and Bright Signals. Thank you for all those on the webinar today for attending, and please complete the feedback form, as we do appreciate your views. So let's get connected, get solutions focused, and let's build a bright future for the construction and manufacturing sectors. Thank you very much. Stay safe.